do it.
Hey, folks, welcome to Draft Talk on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I'm Alan Saunders. That's Nick Farabaugh. We're talking the 2022 NFL Draft and the Pittsburgh Steelers just about every weekday in the month of April leading up to the draft, which is now just 1 week away, 7 days from today. We will be talking about the Steelers' first-round draft pick and who they've taken at number 20 overall. And today we're going to talk about a position that certainly could be in the running to be that pick at number 20. We're going to talk about defensive line and how it is a need for the Steelers and could line up for especially their needs in that first pick. First, let's talk about the Steelers defensive line. This is a unit that's really struggled last year, but also was missing two of its key pieces. Tyson Alualu missed almost the entire season with a knee injury, and Stephon Tuitt missed the entire season with both a knee injury and some personal issues. Alualu should be back. No one really seems to know whether Tua is going to be back or not, but that makes defensive line certainly an issue for the Steelers, both because they don't know what's going to happen with Tuitt, and their other starters on the line are not exactly young. Ahulu, one of the oldest starters on the team at 34, and Cam Hayward, who had maybe his best professional career, is still about to turn 33 and is not a young guy either. So both a current and future need for an impact player on the defensive line. The Steelers do have depth. They don't have an emergency problem when it comes to depth. They brought back Montrevious Adams on a free agent deal. They also have Henry Mondu. They have Isaiah Loudermilk. They have Carlos Davis. So they have some depth, but there definitely feels like to me there is a need for a future starter at this position, if not a current starter, if Tuitt is not going to return. And this is also a position where players are frequently a year away. You look at Cam Hayward, he was drafted in 2011, didn't really become a starter until 2013. And so this isn't a position where you can frequently go out and get guys to just be like, here's our replacement if need be. So I think a major need for the Steelers this offseason, especially guys that project to be starters at the position. And, well, the draft lines up pretty well for them in that regard, especially at number 20. Nick, I mean, the guy that everyone is going to want to hear about is obviously Jordan Davis, the all-everything Georgia defensive tackle, who is just a giant athletic freak. What can you tell us about him? And then is he going to be available when the Steelers pick at number 20?
Yeah, Jordan Davis, man. I tell you what, this guy is one of the most unbelievable athletes. How about running a 4.78 at 341 pounds? I mean, that's unbelievable. And
341. That's gigantic.
And he jumps 32 inches. He jumps over 10 feet. To be 10 inches, rather. Yeah, 10 feet. And so this is like unbelievable, like stuff he does. His split, his 10-yard split, 1.68 at that size. Are you kidding me? I mean, the dude's not just fast, he's explosive, he's strong as hell, and you can tell that on film. I mean, he ragdolls guys. And I say this in the context of what he was asked to do. He wasn't even asked to one gap, and he wasn't asked to, like, okay, Jordan, go straight ahead and just run through that guy's face. No, he was asked to two gap and, like, hold his spot, and he still wrecked everybody. Sometimes he wrecked two guys, three guys. I mean, there are clips of him pushing the guards back right into the freaking running back. I mean, it is really something to watch. And he is such an athletic freak that there is so much upside there. And as a run defender, from day one, this guy's going to be one of the best run defenders in the NFL. And I truly believe that. And so the question then becomes, is that people will bring up is, okay, why is he not thought of as like a top 10 pick? And the reason is people are going to say he's a nose tackle. Okay, he's a two-down player. I'm not sure, and I think there is upside to this. I don't think he's great as a pass rusher just yet, but he also wasn't asked to do just, again, that one gap, go straight ahead type role. Are we sure Jordan Davis can't play three technique? Like, are we sure he can't? I get he's 341 pounds, but he's athletic, he's explosive, and he's a dude that could really come right at your face. And yes, he has to improve his hands in the pass rush game a little bit. But I think he has three-down upside. And I think this is the most important thing. I don't know if he's the three-down guy just yet. I think he can be, though. And there's every reason for me to believe he can be that. And he's going to be very very good, a guy that's going to command double teams, a guy that's going to command everything. He's completely changed his game over his career at Georgia. He has moved up and up and up and has continuously improved as a player. The guy's a complete monster. And so, I mean, we're talking about, if he comes to Pittsburgh, we're talking about the second reincarnation, but more athletic version of Casey Hammond. I mean, we are talking about a guy with more upside than Casey Hammond. Casey Hammond doing a really good nose down. And so, do I think he's going to 20? No. That's why, because I just described everything. He's not making it to 20. Because there are, if the Steelers want him and want to trade up for him, I think it's actually feasible. They have to get above 15. I can't see him getting past Philadelphia. I can't. I mean, they have a desperate interior D-line need there in Philadelphia, and he kind of aligns with them the best. And, they talked about trading Fletcher Cox and doing all of this stuff. And I think Jordan Davis is going to be an Eagle. That's my prediction. But if he's not an Eagle, he's going to be a Charger. So, you get all this stuff. And Jordan Davis can go earlier than that, too. There are other teams up there that could take him. He could go as early as 8 to Atlanta. What if, they want to keep him in Georgia? That could happen. And so this is a guy that's a freak talent. I can't see him get the 20. I just can't see it. He's too athletic. He's too much of a valuable piece in a too high league. He is such a dominant player and such a fun player. I just can't see a team passing up on him, especially like the Eagles. They need that interior D line so bad. I think they'd be fools to pass on him. They have 2 picks too, so they ain't getting him the first time, get him the second time.
Yeah, I do think there's some questions about, like you talked about, where he can play. Obviously, he can play the nose. Can he be a 3 technique? Because there are some teams that don't ever use a nose, right? And I think that does take him off the board, or at least reduce his desirability. If you're a team that only ever plays, 4 down, 3 tech, so I'm getting technical here, but what the Steelers play is in base defense 5-0-5 or something close to that, where you have 1 nose and 2 ends. 4-3 teams will play something like a 7-3-3-7 or 9-3-3-9, whatever you want to. And so that means tackles that are lined up, more over the guard than over the center.
Yeah, and here's the thing about the Steelers. You talked about the 5-0-5. It's moved more to 4 eyes now for the Steelers. So they're a little bit more head on that guard. So it's really 4-eye-0, 4-eye. And sometimes they'll even shade that nose over, so he's essentially a 1 tech.
4-eye-1-4, or it's 4-eye-1-5. They do that a lot also.
They do that.
If you're a team, but the Steelers don't play that much base anymore. But if you're a team that doesn't ever play base, I just think Davis is then not as desirable for you. But if you're a team like the Steelers, who still plays, I don't know, maybe 15-20% of their snaps in a base defense with a nose tackle, a 0 or a 1 technique, and then you think he can also be that 3 technique tackle that can play the sub package, maybe even, I don't think Jordan Davis would start as a 3 technique for the Steelers right away, right? I would put obviously Tuitt is going to start there if he comes back. Even if he doesn't come back, I think they would play Hayward and Alulu ahead of Jordan Davis right away. But I think he has the ability to develop into that and be a rotational piece. Defensive line is a place where you play a ton of players. I mean, Mondu's going to play, Loudermilk's going to play, and I think that Davis is better suited for that 3 technique spot than those guys are. Those guys are built to be 5 techs in that base defense, but they're not really as effective on the inside. Now, Montravius Adams can do that, but I do think the Steelers are, you're talking about trading up, especially, there are a lot of teams where he is not going to be as valuable for them as he would be for the Steelers, who do use that traditional nose.
Yeah, and the thing about Davis that's cool is you have the tape at Georgia where he plays 3 tech. So you have tape to go off of where he has played 3 and 1. Now, he hasn't moved further than 3. So can he play 4-eye-5? I don't know. Now,
probably not.
That's the fun thing about Tyson Alualu is that he can play 5, he can play 3, he can play 4-eye, he can play all up and down the line. That's the fun thing about him. Also, the fun thing about what they're kind of doing with Isaiah Loudermilk is that he's, growing up and getting a little bit stronger. They're going to be playing him like that. So that's kind of the fun thing about him. So the Steelers, I think one thing that they value on the defensive line is they value versatility. And I think I'm not saying that this is going to detract them from Jordan Davis, but I don't think he's going to have the same interchangeability. I don't think you're ever going to move him out to 5. I think you're going to keep him 3 in, essentially, is what I would say. But he can play the 3, and I think he's able to be that. He's going to be a true nose. If he comes to the Steelers, I mean, that might be can you believe Devin Bush and Miles Jack aren't just going to shoot every gap behind them? I mean, playing behind Jordan Davis, potentially Stephon Tuitt or Tyson Alulu, and then Cam Hayward. I mean, and TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith at that too on the edge. I mean, there's zero reason why the inside linebackers wouldn't come clean every single time. So it makes sense to me. The fit makes sense. And I think for the Steelers specifically, this is one of the better fits for Jordan Davis. And I think Jordan Davis also, and the other fit I really like is Philadelphia, because they play that 4-3 in Philadelphia, but he's going to be a 3-1 there. And that makes sense where he can slant. You're not going to single block the guy. You know, he can take on combos really well. So there's so much to look at there, but he would fit in the Steelers scheme really well, because the Steelers, while they run that traditional 3-4 still, there's been a lot of blurring of the lines in the sub-package world. And I think it's not necessarily a net negative that Jordan Davis can also fit in there as a 3-tech.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, this is the number 32 run defense. I mean, it's not like, I mean, we talked a lot about quarterback. We talked a lot about, you know, linebacker and corner and wide receiver and all the other, like the fixing the run defense is a pressing need for this team in 2022. They absolutely cannot be as porous against the run as they were last year. I definitely think a lot of what we saw with Devin Bush and his struggles were because there were just too many free linemen getting through to the second level. The Steelers linebackers, you can't have linebackers that you're asking to do a lot of coverage, and so you need smaller athletic guys, and then have them beat guards one-on-one. That's not going to work. Like you need one or the other, right? And so, you know, the Steelers went with smaller guy like Devin Bush. He's not going to be able to take on offensive linemen one-on-one. They have to clear those lanes in front of him and let him flow side to side of the football and use his athleticism to break up plays. So yeah, I think it's really important that they fix their run defense, and Jordan Davis would go a long way. Now, I agree. I don't think he'll be there at number 20. I'm kind of surprised he's even talked about as being able to get out of the top 10, but there are some scheme fits there that aren't great for him. But like the Jets, I think that's a good scheme fit for the Jets. And I would be, I don't know what I don't know what their draft mindset is, but man, I think they could do a lot worse than Davis as well. They're picking two picks in the top 10. So, I mean, if it's not Davis though, if he's off the board, who are the other defensive linemen that are possible options for the Steelers at number 20?
There's only one more, and it's Devonte Wyatt, the other Georgia defensive lineman. I mean, there are not that there aren't guys that are talented to potentially fit in here. I know that Logan Hall from Houston has had a lot of traction lately to fit into that top 40 range. I just can't see him being at 20. I think that's a reach for them. But Devonte Wyatt's interesting because there will be people that'll argue with you that Devonte Wyatt's the best interior lineman in this class, and there will be people for that, because he has the pass rush chops. Like, he has that flair. There are a few issues with his profile. The first one is that he's going to be 24 years old. So he is going to be an old rookie. So not that you can't develop at 24, 25 years old, but usually by the time you come out at 24 years old, you're a pretty polished guy. You don't have a ton of upside to go with. But Devonte Wyatt's a pretty nice player. And a guy that played 4 years at Georgia from freshman to senior year, a guy that has played really well, has great athleticism, very disruptive, great penetrator, good pad level, has excellent change of direction. This type of guy that has pretty good pass rush moves already. And I say this because people will be like, yeah, that's like, that means nothing. But he's like a juiced up version of Chris Warren. And by that, I mean, Warman's a really good technician with his hands. He has a ton of moves, a ton of counters, and so he's really solid as a depth piece. The issue with Chris Wormley has always been the athleticism isn't great, and so he doesn't have the same pop Wyatt does. So Wyatt can be a really high upside version of that. And I think he's a good run defender as well. He gives excellent effort, but I think there are going to be a few things that are going to kind of take him away from him. The first thing is, again, he's 24. Not that the Steelers don't draft guys that are older. They do. They draft guys that are older.
The defensive line is
Najee
not
Harris.
like a running back position where, like,
Yes.
yeah, like you're not going to, you should not be able to project a big improvement from an older player, but you can play defensive line until you're 40.
Yes. But the Steelers do like to draft guys. They don't usually draft 24-year-olds. I'll say that. They draft 23. Yes. So we've seen them draft 23. Najee Harris was 23 years old. I think Deontay Johnson was 23 years old as well when he was drafted. So they do draft older players. So that doesn't completely eliminate him. What does, I think, eliminate him is that there are off-the-field concerns. And I think this is where Devonte Wyatt's thing gets muddied. If he was there at 20, and by the way, I don't think Wyatt's going to make it to 20 either. I do not. Unless these off-the-field concerns are going to be, huge, which, I mean, I think he's been cited for multiple domestic violence incidents, which is just not a situation the Steelers have veered themselves to recently. They did that in the early 2010s where they were like, okay, maybe we'll start taking chances on guys with a little bit of character concerns, and they have completely overcorrected back the other way now. So I'm not even sure he's going to be on their board, to be quite honest with that in mind. I think he's a really fun player. I mean, a very versatile player. We're talking about, as Davis was locked into 1, Wyatt can go all the way out to a 7. I mean, honestly, like that's the type of guy we're talking about here. Anywhere from the 7 to the 1 to the nose. Honestly, he could play wherever he wants. But if he gets drafted by the Steelers, Wyatt's probably a 3 to a 5, right? Not probably going to be your nose. He would be the replacement for Tuitt, is what I am trying to say. He would be the replacement for Stephon Tuitt. And so that is what he would be. But I think, the football player, really great player. And so I feel like you're going to see a team, again, Philadelphia, if Jordan Davis is on the board. There are other teams there like Atlanta that need an interior D lineman. The Jets could take Devonte Wyatt. The Texans could take Devonte Wyatt. The Chargers could take Devonte Wyatt. There are a lot of teams before Pittsburgh that I think get Devonte Wyatt. He's just such a moldable player. But I'm not sure the Steelers are going to be the team, even if he's there at 20, that's going to be willing to bet on him with those character concerns. I
agree. And I also think he is a better fit for those 4-3 only teams, a more projectable fit. I mean, not that, I don't think that Davis can do it, but he is clearly like pretty custom built for that 3 tech role that a lot of teams need, a better pass rusher, which is what a lot of teams are looking for from an upside standpoint as well. To me, it really drops off from there, though. I mean, I don't think there's another player that's even really remotely in first round consideration. Most of the rest of the guys, honestly, are players that I think could be there when the Steelers pick in the second round. Guys like DeMarvin Leal from Texas A&M, Travis Jones from UConn, Perry Winfrey from Oklahoma, Phil Mathis from Alabama. I mean, I think those guys can be fits, but like, I don't think we're talking about guys that are going right after the Steelers pick it in the first round. I'm talking about guys that can be there in the second. Are you with me there?
I think there's a lot of guys in the second. And I referenced Logan Hall earlier as a potential fit. A guy that's actually really athletic and has played edge. He's going to be an interior guy, but he has played edge and can play edge. So how athletic and fluid he is. So he's a fun player. But we talked about some players here. I think, Leal's one of them. Travis Jones from Connecticut. Dude, Travis Jones at the Senior Bowl was something to watch. This guy was unblockable. Perry Winfrey was another guy at the Senior Bowl that was just unbelievable. And so I think this round 2 crop here, you have a few guys. Leal, Winfrey, Jones, Hall are like that batch of 4 here in round 2. That makes sense. And I want to put the big one next to Leal because Carl Dunbar was at Texas A&M's Pro Day. That's significant to me. You send the D-line coach there. I think Leal 52 makes some sense to me. And we're talking about a type of guy that makes complete sense for the Steelers, right? DeMarvin Leal is the type of former high pedigree guy, 5-star, recruit that has a ton of natural talent. I mean, the natural talent for Leal is crazy. He's a little light, 283. Maybe want to get that up to 290, 295-ish, but just very rare athletic traits. And the Steelers have always valued athletic traits at the defensive line position. So I
think another guy though that not like could be a Tuitt replacement, but not a nose tackle.
No, 3 tech where you can, probably a traditional 4-3 tech that can play a 5. and then work inside as the 3 in the subs. That's kind of what I view him as. I think he's a nice fit in Pittsburgh. I think he's got that type of power just to really collapse pockets, had a great bull rush. Just has to find that consistency to his game. And so there are some things he needs to do, but the natural effort's there. He works hard, reportedly a great person. He reminds me a lot of like in Steeler land, if you're talking about, guys that Pittsburgh has gone up against before and has seen a lot of in playoffs and overall, like Chris Jones from the Chiefs, seen him a lot. Similar kind of profile, I think, to him. I really like him, though. I think he's got a ton of upside, and he's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. And when he was getting that first round hype, because this was a guy that was thought of as maybe last year, if you look at mocks last year, he was mocked in like the top 10, and now he's fallen to 52 sometimes. I think he's a sleeper pick at 52. I think it would be a great pick as well. I think he's that type of guy that, sits for 1 year, 2 years, and steps right in, and boom, you have a really good player here in DeMarvin Leal. And then, Travis Jones is a really fun player too, out of UConn, just dominated every step of the way. This guy is an athlete. This guy is like Javon Hargrave. Squatty build, doesn't have the same squatty build as Hargrave. I don't know any other defensive lineman that has the same build as Javon Hargrave. But the same
beer
type
barrels are the only thing that has the same build as Javon Hargrave.
honestly, but the same type of thing, right? Like thick lower half, very explosive, very polished in the pass rush department. I mean, just a deadly guy from the nose tackle position. A rare fit at the nose tackle position that gives you pass rush upside. And if we know anything about the Steelers in the nose tackle position, they value pass rush upside at that position. They have kind of amended their look for the nose tackle from a pure run stuffer, which was back, in the 2000s to the Casey Hampton days. So now, okay, you need to be a pass rusher. Alulu's been that. Adams is that. And so everyone that has come in since really Javon Hargrave at that position has been a pass rush centric nose. And so I think that this is the guy that could make sense for them there. Perry and Winfrey is more in that same range as
he played the nose a lot at Oklahoma, but I actually think he's probably a one gap player in the NFL. Could be, but I think probably a one gap guy. But man, I love his motor and I love his energy.
Yeah, and I love his athleticism too. And a guy has fantastic explosiveness. If you know anything about defensive line play, explosiveness is so important. And so all these guys are explosive. And he's a guy that can work in a scheme as a 3 tech, a 5. I think you're completely right in saying, play a lot of nose at Oklahoma, but a guy that's going to actually move out in the NFL at 3 to 5 could probably play as far out as 7. Again, Steelers don't really do that. But could do it if you needed him to do it. He's got that motor. He's got that fluidity. He's got the explosiveness. He's got the bend. That's been the one thing that sticks out to you about Winfrey is that he is so flexible. So in that short area where he has to bend, and this even you hear it a lot more with edge rushers, bend. It matters for interior guys too. If they can bend, it really helps with that short area kind of angle to get to the quarterback. So it matters. And so it gives Winfrey kind of some different feel to almost anyone else. He's got the best bend of the interior lineman in this class. So I really like what you see with Perry and Winfrey. I think he's a really fun player, man. And so I think you have some really good choices there at 52. I think that would become potential future stars and stalwarts on your defensive line.
I agree. The last guy, the day 2 guy, probably for me that I really want to touch on is Phil Mathis from Alabama. 315 kind of sized guy, can definitely be a nose in the NFL, maybe better suited for a 3 tech, but I think can definitely play the nose. And also recruited by Carl Dunbar to play at Alabama. Steelers have a pretty significant connection there. They sent the whole crew down to Alabama's pro day, and you say, okay, yeah, it's Alabama, but Jameson Williams and Michi weren't they weren't running. I mean, Mathis was one of the big draws at that pro day, and Colbert and Tomlin were there. So I think a significant interest in the player, and I think a pretty solid fit. I mean, if you look at okay, what's a Tyson Alulu replacement look like? To me, I think Phil Mathis is kind of it.
Yes. And so Phil Mathis is interesting because he's a player that when you look at him, doesn't really flash a ton, I guess. He's not a flashy player. But when I think of guys that are polished, that are ready to come out, and that are ready to play from day one, he's one of the most polished defensive linemen you're going to find in the class. Very experienced player, knows how to play multiple spots on the D-line. I say this, very, very versatile player. This is a guy that can play anywhere from the 0 to the 5. And so very important for the Steelers to have that. I think he's a perfect fit, though, as like that 3-4-5 tech. I think that's probably where he ends up playing. I think he can play the nose. Again, he can, but I like him as a 5 tech a little bit more because I just think he's able to use his athleticism a little bit more naturally out there. Has a really nice array of pass rush moves, can move along this front and do a nice job. And I think for defense, he actually has a little bit of work to do with. But he's just such a technician with his hands. Yeah. And anytime you have really good hands with solid athleticism, you're probably going to be a quality defensive line at the NFL level. It's very rarely that you buzzed out. And so, Phil Mathis is a guy that I feel like at 84, I think like that's where you would look at him. And at 84, like it's great value for him. I feel like me personally, I don't get why he's not being talked about a little earlier. I think he's a really solid player. He strikes me as one of those guys that gets drafted in the 3rd round and he's like in the NFL for 12 years and people are like, wow, how did he fall that far? He's going to be.
I totally agree. And super productive college player, had 9 sacks last year as an interior defensive lineman. That's off the charts. Also like a couple, he's forced a bunch of fumbles. Like, I don't think he's necessarily like a super great instinctual run stuffer. I think he's just big and strong and a little bit raw there, but man, he's 315. He's still going to be big and strong in the NFL. Like that's going to track. I think he can get better as a run stopper, but man, I just think versatile player, and that's like exactly the same. Like you say, like he's probably better as a 3 or a 5. Yeah, I agree, but I think I would say that about Alualu too, right? Like, I mean, they're using him kind of out of position as that, like, he's a nose that doesn't have he's an end that doesn't have crazy athleticism, so he's playing the nose, but he's strong enough to 2-gap, and I think that's the big thing I see from Mathis is that he can be, like, compared to, like, Winfrey, who I think you're more, like, making a projection for him to be able to be a 2-gap player. I feel very strongly that Mathis can be a 2-gap player in the NFL.
Yes, and that's the thing. You don't see, and the thing is, like, 2-gapping isn't very common anymore. You see a lot of 1-gapping nowadays, but he can 2-gap, and the Steelers do still 2-gap a little bit. Now they ask their D line, and one of the reasons why you see so much increased production from guys like Cam Hayward and Stephon Tuitt is because the Steelers realized kind of what they had, and we're like, okay, let's just let the guys go. Let's 1-gap. Let's let them take it on, and let's force these guys to block them. They still do 2-gap every now and then, though, and they did a lot more last year with the more depth guys. And so, yeah, I think Phil Mathis is the fit for that, and I think he allows you the ability to do that. And so he can 1-gap, he can 2-gap, he can do whatever you really want, but let him attack and let him go at it. And so a guy that can just do a lot of different things, a guy that will primarily be a really solid player. The biggest thing that's going to hurt him is the fact that he's a little tight. And by that, I mean, he's a very tense player, just not fluid. So he's not going to change direction a lot. He's not going to be able to Hesse step you in like some other guys. He's going to have to work through you and use his hands. The good news is he has all of that with him. And so he brings the technician side. So he's going to be a productive NFL player. He's developed that. And I think Carl Dunbar is going to be, looking at him and saying, yeah, I think I want this guy. He makes complete sense to me in that regard. Very kind of rare in terms of this draft, in terms of guys that I could see doing stuff like that. Maybe another guy that I could see doing some of this is Haskell Garrett from Ohio State. Not to the same degree, though, not as polished as Phil Mathis is. Personally, I think John Ridgeway, as well from Arkansas, is like fun, but more of like a nose tackle, a versatile nose tackle that can do it. But I think Phil Mathis is this versatile kind of Frankenstein that the Steelers could really use. and he could be like an upgrade on someone like a Mondu, essentially a more polished version of, because that's been always the issue with Henry Mondu too. Is okay, he's explosive and he can play a lot of different positions. He's just a very tense player, and so he doesn't really move well laterally and doesn't have the hands that Mathis does. So if your top six are Alualu, Adams, Tuitt, Hayward, and then you add Mathis and Warmly, and then you probably keep 7 in that because Loudermilk as well. Like that's a really good top 7. That's one of the best D lines of the NFL. So yeah, take that any day of the week.
I agree, and I like Garrett as well from Ohio State. There are a couple other players that seem like fits. Ogbonia from UCLA and Farrell from LSU, but I feel like this, much like we talked about at linebacker, where this is a position where they don't like absolutely need bodies. It's just, they have Wormley, they have Loudermilk, they have Carlos Davis, they have, they have Mondu, they have the bottom of the roster full. They don't need just to get depth like they do at, say, wide receiver, but they need potential future starters. So if it's not day 1 or day 2, I'm not sure we'll see the Steelers take a defensive line.
Yeah, so I don't know why they would. I think there are, and that's kind of a shame because there's so few really nice candidates here, but they have intriguing depth already. They have Mondu, they have Carlos Davis, they have Khalil Davis, who are athletic players. They have
traded their 4th round pick in this draft to get Loudermilk last year. So they kind of already used one of their draft assets on that 3rd day of this year's draft on a defensive lineman.
And there's no reason, and they're not going to give up on Loudermilk because he had a pretty good rookie year. Relative to what I thought he would have, for sure. He looked a lot better than I thought. Like, they have something there, in my opinion, in Isaiah Loudermilk. So, there's really, who are they going to push off the roster? Montravius Adams? No, because Monty played really well at the end of last year. Wormley's a really good veteran player. That's one of the main rotational guys. Unless they keep 7, and if they plan to keep 7, which they could keep 7 defensive linemen, and you're pushing Mondu and Davis, and you think a guy there in round 4 has good enough value to where they could be that guy. And there are a number of guys there, like a Matthew Butler from Tennessee is really interesting to me. My first exposure to him was in that Pitt game that they played in Knoxville, and he had a really good game there. And then he kind of followed it up. It was playing really well. Again, John Ridgeway, I think, is a fun player there. I wouldn't be surprised if they took a look at Matt Henningsen from Wisconsin. It kind of, got the whole Wisconsin band together, a type of guy that can play that 3-4. But I think if you take, personally, and this is to me, if you take a later day 3 guy, he's got to be a 5-tech, just because you feel like Davis and, Davis is more of a nose. Like both Davises are nose more so. And then Mondu is a 5-tech as well. So, he's a 5-tech, but he hasn't really showcased any, staying power yet.
Yeah.
And so, to me, if you're taking a guy late, it's a 5-tech to a 3-tech. And so a Matthew Butler type who played nose but has played 3 fits that. I think Otito Ogbania from UCLA fits that as well. That can work in these fronts that they run. There are other names that you can throw out. Thomas Booker from Stanford, Neil Farrell Jr. from LSU could be a nose tackle that they take on day 3 if they really want that. They went to LSU
I just
pro
don't
day.
see the day 3 nose tackle with. They have both Davises and Adams behind a little. That just doesn't seem necessary.
It doesn't. And there are a ton of.
I like Farrell though. I think he's a good player.
I think he's a good player too. I just don't see it. I think someone like Christopher Hinton from Michigan would make more sense. There are a ton of nose tackles this year, and there's some good nose tackles. Kurt Hinish from Notre Dame is a Pittsburgh native, of course. He would make sense if they want that. A guy that's very interesting is Noah Ellis from Idaho, who is a really athletic player, very raw, but very athletic. I mentioned him more so as a practice squad stash with a ton of upside. The type of guy you stash on that practice squad and you hope can turn into a gem, because this dude is athletic as hell. And really raw, but just a really fun player to watch. But there are other guys like Ioma Uwarzurike from Iowa State is pretty fun. A really good run stopper, athletic, needs to improve on his pass rush plan though a little bit. But there are some players here, LeBron Ray, Marquand McCall. Like I'm naming so many nose tackles. It's just unreal. It's one of the. I'll say this: the nose tackle class is fantastic. Like fantastic.
Yeah, it really is.
Like you don't find this many pure noses, but if you're looking for say a 3 tech or a 5 tech, I think it's a little more thin. And so yeah, I think I would agree with you that it's less likely they take a guy on day 3. Maybe they take, a guy, like I said, like Noah Ellis, who has that athletic upside in like the 7th round. But I think a UDFA upside guy at that 5 tech spot makes more sense than say spending a day 3 pick.
How about Keyshawn Camp from Pitt? Ran ridiculous 40 time at his pro day. Guy who had a ton of injuries in college, but really was extremely productive when he was healthy. I think a high upside risk choice for like a UDFA type.
Yeah, I think that is extremely interesting because Keyshawn Camp, we've talked about him before. The issue's never been the play on the field, man. Never has it been the issue. Every time he's on the field, he makes plays. I mean, sometimes he takes over games. And sometimes when he's on the field, he outshines Kalijah Cansey at times. I mean, that's the thing. That's like the player he is. Super, super powerful, super athletic, has a real squatty build, has good pad level. Like, he's a good player. He just has so many injuries that have accumulated. So UDFA for Keyshawn Camp, I like that as a pick, and I certainly like that pick.
I agree. All right. I think that's it for the defensive line. We've got a couple more of these. We'll hit another position tomorrow, probably. And then we're going to talk to Kevin Colbert and Mike Tomlin on Monday. We'll have reaction from that. Then we'll have Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday early to talk about what we think the Steelers are going to do and wrap up these position by position deals. And then Thursday night, 1 week from today, 2022 NFL draft begins. Steelers have pick number 20. We'll also have some plans for you next week about what our live coverage is going to be here on the YouTube channel. We will have some kind of live coverage as we have for the last few years of the 2022 NFL draft with myself, Nick, maybe Cale Berger, Mike Asti. I'm not sure exactly what the plan is, but as soon as we get word from the Steelers about what they're going to be doing, we will let you guys know what we're going to be doing as well. And of course, make sure you hit like and subscribe here on the YouTube channel. Hit that bell for notifications so you get a notification every time we have a new video here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, whether it's Pirates, whether it's Steelers, whether it's Pitt football, whether it's whatever. We got soccer. I was in Cincinnati Tuesday for the Riverhounds, all kinds of stuff going on. And you can also find us on anywhere you find your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Check it out there as well. If you are more of a listener than a viewer, we appreciate you all for watching and listening throughout Draft Talk in 2022. For Nick, I'm Alan. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.